a special edition of China EVs and More, episode 163. Lei and I have not been recording for the last couple of weeks, so apologies, and we haven't been sending the latest episode, so we're going to do that in the next week or so. But he and I are currently on the road, G4 highway, headed to Changsha in an XPeng G9 Performance version. And we spent yesterday going from Beijing to Zhengzhou, and for the majority of this drive, we've been using XPeng's NGP ADAS system, and it's worked out quite well. But that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today, among other things. Our trip back to China. I started in Shanghai. Lei went directly to Beijing. I spent a few days doing a few things before heading to Beijing. We'll talk about the auto show. And lastly...
Let me stop you right there. There's just...
whoa.
See that? Yep, here's heartbreaking. But here's some Xiaomi vehicles.
Yeah, is this the same one? It's got to be the same thing.
Yeah, the same ones that we just passed earlier. Do continue.
And we'll also be talking about the biggest news from yesterday, Elon making his way to China on Sunday night, and I think he's going to be visiting the auto show, but his most important visit today, or his most important visit, was to Lijiang. It sounds like he is trying to work his magic as we drive over some rumble strips, as Elon is trying to work his magic in order to get FSD or full self-driving rolled out to compete against services like XPeng's NGP. Now, whether or not that's going to be successful, we still don't know. I speculate that there will be a limited FSD rollout later this year, likely. Now, how that shapes out, still not sure, but we can unpack that during this drive. So Lei.
Yeah, so here, well, let's go into, we can talk about this triplet, but since we're talking about FSD, let's point to one important news that happened as Elon made his way into China, which is there's this national data security or safety requirement that Tesla just got approved on the day that he arrived, which means what we've heard previously, news that some of these Teslas are now not allowed into certain compounds. Well, no more.
Primarily military compounds.
Right. Well, there's no more of that stuff. They can be anywhere. So I think in that sense, it's almost like Elon's here thanking the Chinese government for that to happen, and then meeting his old pal, Li Qiang, which was pretty much the person that gave him the approval for Giga Shanghai when he was the mayor. So, and then plus the FSD that Tu talked about, and we'll see that news perhaps, develop over the coming weeks and months.
Remember that Elon got Shanghai Giga up and running within less than a year, or about a year. So that wouldn't have happened without some of Li Qiang's help. And I think they still carry on a pretty favorable relationship with each other. So very, very public visit from Elon. It was in Chinese media. It was in Western media as well. So I think it was important public display for both sides. And during the auto show, during the auto show. So if and when Elon meets up with Lei Jun today, the automotive internet is going to blow up, because Lei Jun was an absolute rock star in the 2 days that I was at the auto show.
Yeah. You were there 2 days. I was there 3 days, and I mean, even on the third day, there were visits by the Deputy Minister of Industry and Information Technology, Xin Guobin, into different booths, and Li Qiang was visiting the show yesterday, checking out booths, visiting Li Shufu, Xiaopeng. So this auto show has basically turned into a pageantry of all of these big shots.
It's a love fest.
And it almost feels like nobody cared about the cars. And because Xiaomi and Lei Jun had been breaking the internet for the last month since the SU7 launched. And just today, they produced the 10,000th unit of that SU7 in like 30 days. And yeah, you were pointing to, I was very much looking to a news come out of Beijing Auto Show that Elon shakes the hands of Lei Jun somewhere at the show, and you know, it's like how he started, how it's going, because Lei Jun visited Elon 11 years ago, and that's probably when he kind of that seed was planted in his head that he would maybe one day produce an EV, and now the SU7 has been constantly in the headlines, online traffic, at the show.
You've heard Elon earlier about talking about how if there wasn't some protectionism, then the Chinese EV brands would pretty much demolish the foreign brands. So there's admittedly a lot of mutual respect between each of these entrepreneurs, these Chinese and American entrepreneur. So I also think that there are selfish reasons. Elon wants to check out the competition as well. And anytime he can create some sort of buzz around Tesla, primarily through coming and visiting, I think that's also helpful.
We're slowing down a little bit because the speed limit went down to 100 kilometers per hour. So this is all connected. So, you know, do we want to talk about this trip a little bit, or?
Yeah, so why don't you start with when you got here and what you did for the first couple days, because the media days didn't start until this past Thursday.
25th, yeah.
And I came to Shanghai almost a week before that.
Yeah.
And you came a few days before media day started on Thursday, so.
So I left the US on Saturday afternoon, the weekend before, and arrived into Beijing on the afternoon of the next Monday, the following Monday. So it was a 34-hour trip for me. You know, arrived, got some rest, and then the next day, I went to check out. The first thing I did was went to check out the Xiaomi SU7 at the Oriental Plaza, which has quite a few showrooms. Neil's there, Yang Wang there has a store. Hyundai has a store, kind of a showroom. And what I learned was two things. The sales associate told me that if you had ordered a SU7 that day, it would take 6 to 8 months before it can be delivered. And second, if you wanted to sign up for a test drive, it was 2 weeks out. And third thing he told me, on a significant day during let's say a weekend day where there's more traffic, they could receive upwards of 6,000 people visiting that store in one day. That's how much this fervor the SU7 has gotten. And yesterday, you can tell the audience what happened.
There's no doubt about it. If you were at the Beijing Auto Show on Thursday and Friday, there was genuine excitement at the Xiaomi booth, a half an hour wait to get in, look at all the 8 different colors that are currently available. But yesterday, as we stopped for...
Here's a situation where I need to take over because there's a flat tire on the road. This truck here has probably just got a flat tire.
You know, that warning keeps on... It gives you a warning because you're blocking the DMS with it. That's why it's doing
That's all right. Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying that's why it's...
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? Oh, so yesterday it was our second stop for recharging, and we saw an SU7. It was the standard version. So you went over and chatted with the gentleman. Nice enough. He was had his wife and small child with him, and he
typical family.
Yeah, and he had said that he bought it from a flipper.
Well, I asked him, what version was this, and he said it's the base version, standard, which is 219,000 edition.
And
And then I asked him, oh, when did you order it? And then, when did you get it delivered? And then what he said was...
he bought it on the
laughed.
secondhand market, and he paid an extra 30,000 RMB for it. So MSRP of the standard version is 219,000 RMB, and an additional 30,000 is 250. So it was about 35,000 US dollars, or the price of a current Model 3 in China. So there are a lot of speculators, or I won't say a lot, there seems to be some speculators for the SU7 as well. So I haven't looked at the secondary market for SU7s in China, but
I'm sure people are benefiting from this, those that are flipping this.
There's always an RMB to be made.
Yeah, who ordered it and then decided to, flip it. And this family is not the first one, I'm sure.
And the one thing that's readily apparent about the show was that Wang Chuanfu is Wang Chuanfu. He walked around a little bit, got a lot of attention as well, but he's not all about trying to make a scene, trying to make a big splash. He doesn't do the presentations for the pressers. He lets his general managers do that, but he's front row center. And, just like typical BYD, they were just grinding it out and get the work done.
He even got into one of those William Lee's selfie videos, talking about when the EV production in Anhui province are going to double. So in Anhui, there's NIO, BYD produces in Hefei, there's Chang'an, and then Volkswagen Anhui is about to start production of this the ID Unix later this year. Plus the Cupra Tavascan that's supposed to be exported. So that's that. But
the things that stood out to me initially were the number of foreign press.
Oh yeah, I think this is the biggest difference. One of the biggest differences if we compare Beijing this year versus Shanghai last year.
And the other important thing is that it's a reminder that Beijing is not Shanghai and Shanghai is not Beijing. Because last year in Shanghai, NIO's booth was twice as large. Porsche had a pretty extravagant booth. This year, they had a few vehicles they were showing, then ended up only displaying the Macan E-Macan. So, and generally speaking, the booths were smaller, but it's just a different type of atmosphere. And what you saw from the foreign press, not a lot of Americans, but a lot of Latin Americans, a lot of South American press. So
Europeans,
yes, and
Japanese, Koreans, I would say.
Yeah. And specifically at the BYD presser, tons of Latin American press. So that should tell you something and indicate something to you. And I was told that Germany has now an exemption for visas entering into China. So I heard a lot of German. And so they definitely took advantage of the 40 days of visa exemption.
X-NGP just did an automatic lane change to pass this little truck up here. Yep.
I wonder why there's so many rumble strips. There weren't that many before, right?
We're actually entering, I don't know, like a mountainous area.
Okay.
It's been flatland, so we're currently driving, I think we're into Hubei province. This is on our second day of the trip from Beijing to Shenzhen. We stopped in Zhengzhou last night. Today, our destination is Changsha, where we're gonna meet our good friend Will from China Driven. So we still have about a little bit less than 500 kilometers to go and 6 hours. So get there in the evening time, but it's all been X-NGP, so we can kind of get a help from the NGP for us to record this thing. Otherwise,
it's not as
I still have to pay attention. So
it's not as tiring, but it's still pretty tiring.
Yeah.
the long drives, and we're looking at averaging around 9 hours a day on the road.
9 hours. So
we should get to Shenzhen tomorrow around 7.
Yeah. So back to the auto show, you talked about the kind of the international feel. Chery alone invited 3,000 overseas partners, including dealers, media. They chartered 2 high-speed rail trains to take them over from, like, I don't know, wherever, Beijing or Shanghai or somewhere else into Beijing, and another one back to, I think they're doing events in Wuhu right now for these people. And they brought them over to the booth at the Chery press conference. I mean, it was bananas. Right? I'm not sure if total Shanghai last year had 3,000 foreign media. So Chery alone.
I'm so glad that I only did the first 2 days because it was quite crowded, and it wasn't even open to the press yet.
Yeah.
Or the public yet. So
here I was there 3 days. Here's how I would describe my 3 days in simple terms. The first day was seeing people, not the cars, because Lei Jun broke wherever the hall that Xiaomi was at with all his entourage and all these big shots kind of visiting each other. The second day, well, the first day also had the press conferences, so kind of ran around. The second day was really a day that I got to really see the vehicles, experience, sit in them, feel it, and kind of compare, who's better this or that. And the third day, I visited some of the, suppliers. So it's, for me and for you, it's our home auto show since we live here many years. I've attended the Beijing Auto Show at least 10 times, right? So I wanted to spend some time to just see it through my own eyes, and second, reconnect with all those people that I knew for those many years, right?
And it's the same people.
It's the same people, but maybe at different companies.
Or different positions.
Or some of the media I knew, they're now in the companies working as marketing.
And I think that one of the biggest differences between auto shows of past years and current, there are so many KOLs, there are so many influencers.
Oh, right. That's something worth to point out.
And so traditional media are really fighting for clicks with a lot of those KOLs. And after all the pressers on Thursday, about 1 or 2 o'clock, they all started creeping out of the woodwork. There were so many mobile phones. There were so many live streams, people just talking and talking and talking, even during the press conferences. So it's just a different type of atmosphere, different vibe, and how things are presented to the media.
I think one of the biggest changes, we talked about the international field, the foreign media, but also how media and content is consumed has totally changed. I was in traditional media. We published China Auto, like print magazines back in the days. And now this year, all you saw was people holding up not one phone, but 2 phones, streaming. One is for the script, the other one is streaming.
There's that guy with 6 microphones.
Yeah, I posted that. And then, because, they had different platforms. This one of the CEOs from a Chinese automaker. And there's probably people holding up the camera for you. There's these, I don't know, ladies and guys,
Well, importantly, Lei, is that there are 30-year-old, 25-year-old influencers that Li Bin is interviewing with on the floor. That would likely not happen at the U.S. auto show.
Right.
Some 25-year-old kid gets time with Li Bin in front of a camera with millions of eyeballs on it.
And one of the things, if it went through the, at least for the Chinese media, if it went through the application process, they actually asked you to show proof how many fans or how many views your platform had. Like there's a certain threshold and that you had to meet in order to get a media pass. So this never happened before. right? You needed kind of a letter, or you needed to have a certain visa or a chop to show that you're legitimate. But at the end of the day, you know, we always figured it out. We got our passes. We got in.
So I will say one thing. On Tuesday before the auto show, you and I sponsored a happy hour at Jing A and CBD in Beijing.
Yep.
And we put it, we scheduled it very last minute, sent out the flyer on Sunday, hoping, and as a welcome to the folks that were coming in from out of town, whether it's from another city in China or from another country. And so people like Roger Atkins stopped by, said hello, drank, shared a beer with us. Simon Wright from The Economist was there as well. Elliot from Fully Charged. So a lot of our friends showed up. So always good, as you had mentioned earlier, Lei, to catch up with those folks, because we don't ever really get an opportunity to outside of the show circuit. And Roger had made a good comment to me about his status. He is not an influencer because he doesn't get paid by the brands. He is a content creator. And one of the things that have a few folks have asked me recently over the last day and a half, because of this drive that you and I are doing in this G9, XPeng G9, is whether we're getting paid. And
we're not.
For the sake of full disclosure, we are not.
So a little story on this. I had, I think it was about a couple of months ago. Oops, somehow we just turned this. Couple of months ago. Okay. A couple of months ago, I had kind of texted Tu and came up with the idea, you know, right after the Beijing Auto Show, I needed to go to Shenzhen because to meet my dad, who's opened up a golf museum at one of these golf clubs in Shenzhen that's organizing the Volvo China Open during the May holidays. And I asked Tu, you know, hey, I have an idea. We have 3 days. Why don't we, you know, find a China EV and drive down? And just what I wanted to experience was first the range, the connectivity, the ADAS, which we're using right now, and the charging infrastructure. I think, which is one of the most important things that's making China EV penetration hitting that 50% pretty soon, probably by next year. And how the X-NGP works on the highways locally. I thought it would be a once in a lifetime experience that probably not many people get to do because of our connections we have and the trust that people have on us to kind of offer our perspectives. And it's our kind of adventure. You know, I didn't plan this. All I think about was we're going to take 3 days. First day, we're going to stop this city. Second day, this city. Third day, we arrive in Shenzhen. Everything else, we'll just see, as we go. And
very quickly, if people are wondering, Beijing to Shenzhen is not a normal road trip for most people in China, number one. Number two, it's about 1,350 miles. So quite a long journey. We are averaging about 120 kilometers an hour on the highway or Gaosu, which is about 64 miles an hour. So we're not going super fast.
So yesterday we covered about 700 kilometers. We left Beijing. I picked up Tu at around 9:30, 10ish, and we got into Shenzhen around 6 p.m. So it was 8 hours.
We got into Zhengzhou.
Zhengzhou. So about 8 hours. And today we're planning a little bit more because it's slightly over 800 kilometers. We left early, but plan to get into Changsha around 6:30, which is what we expected.
If we get in before 7, I'll be feeling pretty good.
And this includes charging. So we just completed a charging session. I think it was 37 minutes. We got from 25% to 90%, which is not bad at all because we were doing all the other things and it kind of flew by.
So the vehicle doesn't recommend that you power up to 100%. So that's why we're looking at 90%. And when you're at 90%, you're at over 500 kilometers. So,
Yeah.
and
And then
no, really quickly, let's just talk about the G9. I'm very impressed. Fit and finish, quality. I don't have any real complaints about that.
Yeah, so this is a G9 650 Performance, Max Performance Edition, which I looked in the app, it sells for 359,000. So the fit finish, it is pretty good, but it is a higher trimmed version of the G9, which is actually the starting price is in 200,000s right now. I think underappreciated, but you know.
And this is a pool car with looks like around 10,000 or 10,000.
Yeah, we started this car at just under 10,000. Right now it's at 11,000. So we've driven over 1,000 kilometers
and
so far.
We had posted on Twitter about this car that we're driving it down, and it looks like Elliot from Elliot Richards and Roger Atkins had borrowed this car for a day right before we did. And so, again, it's pretty impressive. 359,000 RMB is right around 50-ish thousand US dollars. So not cheap, but this is the high-end trim.
It's a big SUV.
Yeah, so it's a large SUV. It's probably the size of a Cayenne, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 5-seater, so there's no 7-seat passengers. But, you know, we're still in the process of evaluating it, and we'll give our full evaluation probably next week's China EVs and more. But that's going to be inclusive of the NGP. So stay tuned for that. But let me ask you, Lei, from a vehicle standpoint, from a brand standpoint, what stuck out to you at the Beijing Auto Show in the 3 days that you were there?
So, you know, we finally get to talk about the cars, which is the important, which is what an auto show is all about. But I was in Beijing this year, it was all about these online traffic. But again, the Chinese brands are, if we think back, right, if you think all the cars we've seen, the Chinese brands stand out. And a few that can name that I think will be my top 10, sort of. The Jiyue 07. Let's see if this car's, yeah, okay. The Jiyue 07, the Denza Z9 GT. I really liked the BYD Ocean M, the small kind of the hot hatch.
Which was at the time still pre-production.
Yeah. And the Qiyuan E07, which is this kind of, we're joking, it's China's Cybertruck, but that's just for joking purposes. It's kind of a new EV. I think it's a plug-in hybrid where there's this bed that can open up and change it into a pickup. But there are a few from the foreign ones that I liked, especially the Mazda EZ6. I think it's very Mazda, but it's a Mazda in the new EVH finally. I kind of like the ID code that Volkswagen, you know, we can talk a little bit most Volkswagen because it's an important year. The ID code basically previews the next generation of EVs that'll come out of both, not both, but all three joint ventures. So Shanghai Volkswagen, FAW Volkswagen, and the Volkswagen Anhui. Future EVs that'll come out post 2026.
So when you mentioned the ID code, that was more about design language, design direction than an actual vehicle. I got to speak with the head of design for the ID code. I forget his name. You know,
Andreas Mann. I talked to him as well.
Yeah, and he seemed very hopeful, and he seemed very focused on really working with the joint venture brands to try to collaborate and come up with solutions that will satisfy each of them. Again, a seemingly impossible task, but the one thing that I'll add to the brands and products that you said were your best of show, I will also say that the foreign automakers showed up. Last year, pretty much silent in Shanghai. So GM, they launched the Cadillac Optic, which is smaller than the Lyric, and it's going to hit around 249,000 RMB, I believe. And then they launched the Buick GL8 or GL8 PHEV, and I was told that that's got a pretty warm reception. And then third, they launched a Chevy PHEV as well. And so
Equinox.
Yeah, Equinox. So they're not taking things sitting down or lying down anymore. I happened to be at the Chevy stand meeting with Eunice Yoon from CNBC to do an interview, and it was whispered in my ear that Mary Barra was going to be at the stand in the next 45 minutes. And so Eunice and I recorded the interview, and she stuck around to see if Mary would want to make any comments, but she did not make any comments to the international press. They were actually super low-key about her being there too. So
yeah, I mean, compared to Lei Jun, all the entourage, all the commotion, I mean, to be honest, Mary Barra looked like a dama in Chinese, which means, I don't know what's a good English name for
I don't
dama.
know, I'll let you translate that.
Almost like now we can, like she was just low key. She was, wearing a handbag on the shoulder, and with Mark Royce
was there too.
Yeah, wearing a white shirt with the khakis and sneakers. Very understated. Like if you didn't know them, you would just think they're just some kind of foreigner.
Yes.
But they were there checking it out. And speaking of, I think it's important to point out, I think Jim Farley, besides Jim Farley and Carlos Tavares, most everybody, maybe some of the Japanese, new CEOs, I think everybody else came. Oliver Blumer, Luca De Mayo, they're not even exhibiting. Came, to GS booth. Jose Munoz,
Yes.
who is the CEO of Hyundai Motor North America. I saw him at the Leap Motor booth.
He was at the LA Auto Show. He presented.
At the New York Auto Show.
Yeah.
I just met him like a month ago. And he used to be in charge of the China business back in 2018, which was his last time attending the Beijing Auto Show, having unveiled the Selfie EV at the Beijing Auto Show that year. That's what he told me. And, I met him and I sent him an email. He was like, he gave me his business card since I'm a Hyundai Santa Fe hybrid owner. And I told him, I'm very happy with it. I bought it at Gary Rome, it was the dealer of the year. And he's like, I gave him my card. Any problem, issues, just send me a message. I wrote him an email, and he replied the next morning, and in it, there was a line. He said, after 6 years, I am shocked. Just like I was shocked last year in Shanghai. And imagine, he's not even in charge of the China business, and he's here to see, right? He's in charge of North America.
Well, and
this is, right?
This should put to bed the thought that the automotive sector is not a global game. And the folks and the executives that aren't here, it actually speaks volumes. Because, Farley, with Ford, they had unveiled the locally built Ford Bronco, which did well, but it's an ICE.
I think Bronco is going to do really well.
Yeah.
It's starting below 300,000 RMB, but that's Ford's kind of the pivot into this. Forget about EVs for now. We're gonna, speaking of products, I think this year the macho kind of the off-roady styled SUVs was hot.
Yes.
Quite a few brands had, like Chery iCar, Tank,
very G-Wagon-ish, Cherry Defender-ish. And so that's where Great Wall really leans into, right? So
could be proven to be a right strategy.
And here's a anecdote, a funny anecdote. Our friend Ash, who works at Geely, he tweeted that he wanted one. He wanted a Bronco. So That should tell you. This was
Yeah.
his personal account, so on Twitter, but that should tell you all you need to know.
Speaking
that,
of GD, I thought the Zeekr Mix would be one of my pick, as not because of the car, but because of it's based on the same platform as that M-Vision robotaxi that
Right.
we've seen quite a few times. But the way how the interior seating can be rearranged,
right.
this kind of smaller MPV. At the same time, this same brand Zeekr has a 729,800 009 Grand MPV that they launched a few days ago, which you went to.
Yes, so
And
I took a fast train from Shanghai to, I forget what city now, but
it's Wuzhen,
Wuzhen, which is the Venice of China.
home of the World Internet Conference.
Yeah, World Internet Conference. It was a spectacular event. It was a huge launch event, and it's an MPV that's 4 seats. So the back seats, it's like for executives. You can fully recline almost in the back seat, and it's going up against, and this is where the China market in general creates a lot of challenges for the traditional automakers, because they're used to very clear-cut segmenting of the vehicles and passenger vehicle side. But this MPV, it's going to be competing against 7 Series, S-Class vehicles and A8s. So what do you do with that? Because the back seat comes with a 43-inch screen, and there are all these amenities that has granite in it.
So basically, imagine you're sitting in the back seat, and this whole screen is what you're looking at. That's what the Grand was basically. This whole screen, like about this size.
And it was a really, really well thought through event, and they spared no expense because there were hundreds of people there. The facility was beautiful. It was a little rainy, but and then I came back, and then ultimately went to the auto show. So what else obviously one company that was absent, who had attended 4 years ago, was Tesla. And if you recall, 4 years ago when they attended, someone famously danced on the roof of 3 years ago.
3 years ago in Shanghai.
No, that was
3 years ago.
Okay,
2021. Yeah.
Okay.
Odd year.
So they famously danced on top of his car, a Model 3, and there was a huge controversy from that. So, but Tesla made up for it by Elon coming on Sunday night to push FSD into the China market, and notified as real-time updates. I've not heard anything else since, except that he was supposed to come to the auto show today.
He's probably there right now as we speak.
And I would
who knows?
think it's absolutely bananas when if and when he's there. And I would imagine that the CEOs of these EV companies that are still in Beijing are likely going to pay him respect by being there at their booths to see and talk with him. So,
yeah. And another kind of the headline or topic we're talking about is these cars and the designers behind them. So I got to meet Klaus Ziosera, who is now the head of design for Chang'an Group, and he used to be Volkswagen Group's head of design. I got to meet Stefan Silaf, the head of design for Zeekr, who used to be the head of design for Bentley. And there's another person, Joseph Caban, who was previously the Volkswagen brand's head of design, is now head of design at MG. So 3 designers from Volkswagen Group basically have, how would you call it, capitulated, or
And
they moved
I must also give Detroit a shout out because Frank Wu,
yeah.
and Colin, I forget his last name, who is a designer at NEO. They're both CCS grads. CCS is a design school in Detroit. So
NEO, Li Auto, probably XPeng, Wolfgang Egger from BYD, right? The Xiaomi's designers, all of them, they worked at these German premiums before.
Yep.
Call it, the copycat of Taycan all you want, right? But there's definitely some influence, of course. But and GAC, right? The head of design at GAC used to be a Mercedes designer, Zhang Fan. And the Chen Zheng, who was the head of design for Geely's Galaxy, used to be from Chang'an. He was headed the Chang'an's design center in Italy before. So. All
this is to say that they saw their weakness in vehicle design and hired who they thought were going to be people that could help put their vehicle design over the top. Now, there were some Western journalists that it appears that, and more on the automotive journalist side than the mainstream media journalism, but these car guys come to China and they're like, oh man, all these cars look similar.
I don't disagree with them.
No, I don't.
We'll talk. Yeah,
But to me, that's missing the plot, because you don't need to come to the show to know. You can look at the pictures and say they're similar, but remember, you're coming to China. Most of these brands are shipping products in China. So these products are for Chinese consumers, okay? So don't bring your bias here saying, okay, they're not up to Western standards, because it's not for the West. This is what journalists and people just need to remember. China's the largest market in the world. European, American, Italian, French brands are now bending to the will of the Chinese customer. Number one, exterior design. Although it's important for a Chinese consumer, you know what's more important? Connectivity and advanced driving assist. So these traditional journalists have no idea how to rate or judge that. And so guess what? They're bitter Betty, because all these cars look the same. Guess what? You know what? That's not important to the Chinese consumer. So why don't you, instead of complaining about what isn't there, try to learn about the largest car market in the world and what's important to those consumers. I think, and I'm jumping on my soapbox, but I'll let you add to it. But this is where, again, don't come to a foreign market and expect products to look like the ones that are in your market.
So I said I did agree with that in the sense that there is some homogeneity of what a China smart EV will look like, styling-wise, right? If you look at a Xiaomi, okay, it's kind of a Taycan. Or if you look at some of these SUVs, they kind of look the same.
For sure.
But to me, I think at least at this Beijing Auto Show, one metric that I would pick as my top models on display would be, how innovative these design thinking were different from some of these homogeneous models. That's why I said, the Zeekr Mix was one of them, because there were some different elements. I would have, picked Chery's iCar V23, which actually was, had input from this CEO who founded Zhimi, which is a Xiaomi invested kind of a ecosystem appliance maker, and it's different, right? So they are having this homogeneity. There are different takes on the styling part of it. So,
and Will from China Driven, he tweeted a good point. He said, Hi-Fi came out, and people bash that. So it's.
Speaking of Hi-Fi, it looks like they may be getting a lifeline from FAW or something.
But
latest news. So. Well, somehow this XPeng's AI assistant
is listening.
Yeah, is listening and just spoke English. So, but anyways, continue. We were talking about hi-fi.
So Will just brought up the point that, okay, if you want some avant-garde design, hi-fi had it, but nobody liked that either. So I again, to your point, Lei, agree totally that, and I'm the one that made fun of it before, right? That said, if you squint, they all kind of look alike.
I think it was a little bit too much, personally, but.
So, but again, we're not even talking about the features for the China market that are the most important to the consumer. It's a foreign journalist talking about car design.
Yeah, and another metric that I would, one of the models I selected was the Mini A-Spin, not because of the model itself, but because of the significance of the company making it, which is the Spotlight Automotive, joint venture from BMW and Great Wall Motor. And that was inaugurated in 2019. Obviously, because of pandemic and other reasons, kind of got delayed a little bit. Now we're 5 years later, and finally, this is one of the first locally produced mini EV in China.
And all minis are going to be Chinese built.
Well,
forward,
some will be built in UK. Yeah.
Okay.
But
anything else that we're talking about?
Aside, I think we can talk about these. If we put these foreign automakers into the buckets, right? I think the most aggressive ones are definitely the Germans. Be it Volkswagen Group, be it BMW, be it Mercedes. We're hearing them talk about in China for China, China speed, doing things locally, developing locally, hiring important talent locally. And one person, for example, would be Frank Han. He's the new head of Carrier China, and he came over from Chang'an, and he helped kind of develop Chang'an's software side of the things. And the Germans, they have a lot interest in China. China is their biggest market. Scholz, German Chancellor Scholz, I just came over to China before the auto show. These guys, Mercedes,
as well as Antony Blinken.
Yeah, Mercedes, they probably stayed all this time since the Shanghai Formula One. These board members, and tell you what, Volkswagen Group, another big significance is they're celebrating 40 years in China. I can even say without the early Volkswagen going into China, investing into China, making that Santana in 1983, there probably is not a China auto industry today.
I think
they have 50 million customers in China.
To piggyback off of that, I think if Tesla doesn't come in 2019 and build a factory in Shanghai,
there's the smart EV of today.
Not at 8.5 million units. Yeah. There's no way that happens.
Well, then from another side, I would argue that, that was thanks to China opening up, right? Because Xi Jinping, he had announced officially in April 2018 that the joint venture rule is abolished, 50-50. And BMW, I think, was one of the first to increase their joint venture stake to 75%. And Tesla was the first 100% operated, the first 100% owned vehicle manufacturing facility in China. So
now, if people are wondering why the GMs, the Volkswagen groups, don't buy out their joint venture partner and go on their own, because remember, these relationships go back decades. Number one, number two, they have distribution that the foreign brands will not have. And so Tesla started from zero effectively. They had the retail store strategy. So how they're laid out is completely different. So the reliance on these joint venture partners is still significant. And I would argue that Volkswagen and General Motors have done well for themselves in the China market, largely because SAIC has been a decent partner of theirs. Or you compare and contrast that to Chang'an and Ford, and then GAC with Jeep, and there's been some challenges. And it's no coincidence they also have problems with vehicles and sales and products in China market. So
Carlos did not come, but his deputy, the guy in charge of China, Gregoire Olivier, he was at the Lead Motor press conference. So I think he's on the board of that joint venture sales company that Stellantis and Lead Motor has.
So we're going towards an hour. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, and let me start, and then I'll let you riff on.
And all this time, by the way, this vehicle has been on NGP, so I'm just holding the wheel and paying attention.
And we moved from 3 and 4 lane highway to a 2-lane highway.
Yep, and it did a few automatic lane changes along the way. So.
Now there seems to be a lot of large tractors and trailers. So
what was the elephant in the room?
Tesla and FSD. So now here's my take, because I've gotten pinged numerous times now about it. Again, I mentioned earlier, great photo op for both sides.
Yep.
China has been kind of talking out of both sides of its mouth a little bit with its policies and some of the things that are happening with foreign companies in China. So this is a great opportunity, again, to your point about Xi Jinping saying back when Tesla came, we're abolishing the joint venture requirement. This could be another opportunity for the Chinese government to say we are open to foreign business because we are allowing FSD to be launched in the China market.
Also a little bit of historical kind of Elon. The first time I saw Elon in person was 2015, and there was an event at Tsinghua University, October 2015. And at that event, he had already mentioned about the possibility of producing the Model 3 in China. And so that discussion had been long going, way before 2018, I believe. And that was the kind of the catfish effect that you kind of alluded to, right? Mm-hmm. If there was no Tesla, no Giga Shanghai, what would happen?
The rest of the industry doesn't get fit. Doesn't get more competitive. Now, this should also indicate Elon coming for the auto show that he realizes selling a Model 2 without some sort of differentiation, because you and I, having just been to the Beijing Auto Show, we've seen numerous feature-packed vehicles for sub $30,000 US dollars.
So in fact, what are we doing now on this NGP? Both the highway and the city, generally it's called NOA, Navigate on Pilot. This level 2 plus feature
which almost every major EV brand has a version of.
Yeah, that's one of the most competitive racetracks in China, and Tesla does not currently offer a equivalent, or I mean they have the autopilot, but it's the simple comparisons is if autopilot is level 2, then the rest of the players, they're already offering level
2.99999.
It's not the right way to put it, but I don't know what's going on here. I think there's construction. So they, I mean, aside from new models, they need to have, it's not even differentiator anymore.
It's a qualifier.
Look at on the highway, this thing works, but we gotta, we gotta be fair, and what we're seeing here on the XPeng is not exclusive to XPeng. Other people are doing this as well. And it's, right?
So in the US, there's Blue Cruise, there's Super Cruise, there's Hyundai has a version, right? But NIO has a version. Huawei, which
because
is
of the construction, I guess. Yeah.
with several
Yeah.
local Chinese
Mostly
state-owned brands.
Yeah, mostly on the ITO.
Yeah, and Huawei's system is supposed to be top-notch as well.
Didn't someone say Huawei now is kind of number one ahead of Xiaopeng?
So they said that it was number 2.
Benchmarking.
And and they said the ArcVox was pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, that has the Huawei.
Yeah. So yeah. Now, where was I? But there's implications to this, because if Tesla capitulates to Chinese requirements for FSD use in the China market, it should be, my guess would be, pretty restrictive versus what's going on in the European and US markets.
Well, the important thing is whether they can get the data outside of China, back to the US, right?
These are just foundational questions, because if they cannot, do they have 2 FSDs? And does that create a huge disadvantage now, because the data that they collect in China can only be used for the China market?
Yeah. Speaking which, going back to Volkswagen a little bit, the 2 ICE vehicles refresh launched, the new Magotan and the new Tiguan L Pro. They're calling them the smartest ICE on the market. Smartest being they're using DJI Automotive to supply the ADAS kind of the capabilities. And so think about that.
And
right?
This goes back to the larger point of, and things we talked about, the bifurcation of the connected vehicle market in China versus the rest of the world, because Toyota also recently announced a partnership with Tencent. So you're looking at foreign brands partnering with local technology providers, and that's likely not going to be crossing any borders. Those partnerships aren't likely going to be crossing any borders. So we might have, for many foreign automakers, 2 separate hardware software stacks, one for China, one for the rest of the world. It's getting more and more like a likelihood as opposed to speculation, because in my estimation, I don't see the United States or the European Union letting up on that stuff, because now we're talking about silicon, we're talking about data, we're talking data privacy, data security, and we're talking about, if you're looking at some of the protectionism that's being discussed, the Chinese brands overtaking, and this is where Europe is the odd man out because of the lack of technology, really high technology in their culture.
Yeah.
So I can't name you one European chip designer that's at the level of an NVIDIA. Now, there are chip design, Infineon, they do memory and things like that, but I can't name any specific, and if I'm wrong, or if there are some, please let me know. I'll be educated. I don't mind making those types of mistakes. But, there's no Apple in Europe. There's no Google in Europe. So there's all these challenges for Europe. And that's likely why they're the first to split off and partner locally with some of the Chinese partners. So,
yeah. And speaking, so on the 3rd day, I checked out, Horizon Robotics, Sesame, Black Sesame, the LiDAR players, and just the point was one, to learn, but actually talk to those people at those different companies and see what they say about their competitors. That's an interesting part.
Yes.
And talking to Horizon Robotics, they said the Black Sesame people, they really have good hardware on the chip, but the algo and the computing side of it is the weakness. Whereas both are trying to do this thing called one chip for smart cockpit and smart driving. Whereas currently it's NVIDIA, Orin, and Qualcomm 8195 or 8295. But in fact, I talked about, I talked to Horizon people and then Black Sesame, they said, we'll never, the aura of NVIDIA, because NVIDIA is not automotive, and NVIDIA is AI, right? Horizon Robotics currently, they're just automotive, right? They're not at the point of AI, right? And then the LiDAR companies, it's all about like.
So this is you raise a great point, Lei, because right now what runs the infotainment systems in many of the better connected vehicles are Qualcomm Snapdragon chips.
At least one, some two.
Yes, and then
same with Orin.
And then to run the AI and the autonomous functions, you're looking at NVIDIA. So truly, NVIDIA has no peer.
Which this probably has.
Yeah. So truly, NVIDIA has no peer when it comes to AI. And I've been told by several people that the Chinese chip designers are still several years behind.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to trying to play catch up. That creates actually a risk for China.
But it's like, what Horizon Robotics did is they launched this J6 or Journey 6, but they launched within this J6, they launched 6 different tiers of this J6. So they have the lettering system. So they have the kind of the E, M, L. Whoa, let's see what this does. Now it's going way too quick. Basically
one lane.
Like entry, mid, like premium. They launched 16 different versions to address different customer needs, right? Diversification. And then, LiDAR companies, they're getting this. I saw this great concept where LiDAR is being integrated into the headlight. And because the pure reason for doing that is because now the LiDAR is getting smaller and more affordable.
But there's definitely a fork in the road between those using vision only.
GUA, for example.
Yeah, so GUA is on the Tesla game.
Yeah. And XPeng, who knows? XPeng, I think they're talking about this end-to-end large model, application.
Because the one thing that's really important to remember is that AI and autonomous, we're still in the infancy stage.
Early stages, yeah.
And
exactly.
so they're still trying to optimize and understand what hardware technology can help provide from a solution standpoint, because as hardware gets better, you create more opportunities to maximize or optimize its usage. So I'm not a technical person, and I don't know enough to know definitively whether, yes, LiDAR hardware software stack is better or vision only, but currently, as Hesai, RoboSense, all these other companies battle it out to get more market share on the connected vehicle side, we're just seeing prices slam down on solid state LiDAR, and they get smaller and more advanced.
I briefly walked by a few battery suppliers, so Eve, Calb, and one other. They all showed their SSB samples. So, plus the regulars, the cylindricals, the pouch, the prismatic, NCM, LFP. I mean, there's, but I don't think that not many people were paying attention.
Yes, because because
it was all
B2B,
right?
But it was all B2B too.
Yeah. So they said these suppliers. They said the first 2 days they actually got some good crowd, but on the third day I went to, which was the first public day, they actually didn't get that many crowd because all the people, they were interested in the cars.
Sure.
And one of the suppliers I spoke to was they no longer want to participate in Beijing.
Really?
Yeah, because, right? I mean, except like Bosch. The other thing about this year's auto show is because of the venue size, Bosch is the regular inside the normal OEM halls.
Yep.
But if you wanted to get into the OEM hall, which Black Sesame did, the PR lady I talked to, she said for 4 straight days, she had to stay up in the morning to kind of like fight for it. because the current exhibition venue is not enough to host that many brands.
Well, could you imagine though? Like, go ahead.
When we talk about auto shows in China, these suppliers, Horizons, Black Sesame, RoboSense, Hesai, they are becoming prominent brands almost in the consumer phase. So they want a big attention. And before that, you don't, right? It's all about the car brands.
Honestly, with the price war, I actually feel that they want some attention because they're fighting for survival as well. Because as the price war pinches prices on OEMs, that goes downhill. And Hesai and RoboSense, they're all getting pushed and pinched by the OEMs now too.
Yeah, talking to one of those big three LiDAR companies, I think they were saying, I won't name which one, but one of them just recently had some job cuts. So,
I think everybody's getting job cuts. One of our friends has talked about the potential NEO job cuts, but I don't see that being a surprise. Anyone, even if you're a healthy company, you might not be able to be as large as you are because of this price war. So I still anticipate the price pressure, downward pressure, to continue through 2024.
Yeah, so this, so that's why I would summarize this year's Beijing Auto Show as kind of a party in a bloodbath, which means people for a few days could forget about that bloodbath in the price competition and just and all these online traffic, and then once the show is over, it's back to bloodbath.
And the European OEMs, the shock and awe of Shanghai turned into a realization that we need to get on board. We need to change.
It was actually great. I mean, I got kind of emotional at the Volkswagen Group night because the way that they did it. Starting off that event, Ralph Brandstetter said in Chinese that we've been friends with China and the Chinese people for 40 years to start off the event.
And that's called pandering.
Yeah,
right? That's called pandering.
Yeah, I know. And then the second part, they had a conversation between Ralph and He Xiaopeng for like 10 minutes. And then I heard it was unscripted. And He Xiaopeng said, I'm in my 40s. So all these 40-some years, I've been growing up with Volkswagen, and today I'm standing on the stand of the Volkswagen Group night and talking to Ralph, and my company being now an important part of Volkswagen Group's ecosystem in China. I mean, he was like, who would have thought, 40 years ago that, this day would come? So I think that was kind of a...
So first of all, I don't have all that history of nostalgia that you do.
Like sentimental.
And so...
I did feel like,
I look at that as completely pandering.
Yeah.
And I look at that as...
I understand,
as genuflecting to paying respects to people because they're in a moment of weakness. They're a point of weakness.
That's true, but still, I mean, that was a great Volkswagen Group night. I mean, and then afterwards, talking to Frank, talking to Andreas,
and this is my counterpoint. The reason I still feel that kind of edgy towards it is because I did speak to several Europeans at the show, and they still seem in denial. They still seem like we can catch up. No problem. We're focused now.
I think part of it is also this bet, which is what I told Sarah from Reuters, that Volkswagen Group is betting in the next 2 years while they execute the strategy for 2026, that many of these players will capitulate because of the price war. That's what they're betting on. And we'll see, right?
That's the...
Which is in part true, because I believe there will be capitulations.
But this is the crazy thing, Lei. Worry about making great product. So it
I
doesn't
think they
matter.
are.
Nah,
well,
dude.
through-
You
no.
just said that they're
No,
worried
no,
about
no.
freaking.
They are through this new tactic of working with XPeng, Horizon, Thundersoft, who else? Right? These local companies, DJI Automotive.
You know that's a formula for disaster, right? Working with all these different partners. Yeah, I mean, at
And
the end of
having
the
all
day,
these platforms, right?
at the end of the day, they're a project manager now.
MEB, CMP, PPE, SSP in the future.
And always remember, if Porsche doesn't do well, then the rest of Volkswagen Group doesn't matter.
But on the flip side, I think rather than not do anything, at least Volkswagen is trying to do something.
Yeah, I get that,
Like,
but again,
you even praised them, I think, on one of the
no,
episodes.
but this is the thing. And speaking with some of these people at the Beijing Auto Show, I still feel that they're not taking seriously enough the degree of seriousness that the things that they need to do. Let's just say that. I can't articulate it the right way right now.
I think they understand what's at stake, but the way to get there probably is debatable. And also, what they believe to be happening is currently from 24 to 25, they describe this current phase as the stabilization phase. Mm-hmm. And then starting from 2026 is when they start with that new offensive, building off of these new partnerships, right?
Yep. With the ID code.
B SUV from XPeng, which is based on this vehicle, by the way.
Yep.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.